Hi, welcome to the Bench Movie Club, and in this episode I shall be reviewing Superman 2025, written and directed by James Gunn, starring David Corenswet, best known as, well, Superman. He has done other things, but like previous Superman, this will be the thing that launches him, I imagine. Like with Christopher Reeve, Routh, Henry Cavill, before they were Superman, they weren't really well known. But I quite like that they always tend to get a relative unknown for the role. You've also got Nicholas Hoult, who of course is in X-Men, About a Boy, so he's already been in a superhero film. Recently he was in Nosferatu, which I wasn't overly impressed with, but I'm quite optimistic about his Lex Luthor, because for the few little clips I've seen, he looks more like the Lex Luthor from the comics, which I don't think we've really had in the films as yet. I'm a little bit apprehensive because James Gunn tends to stick a lot of characters in his films, but I suppose if he can get the balance right, it might be fun like a superhero or a Superman film should be. So I'm going to go in and watch it, and then I'll give my review afterwards. So here we are. Just finished watching Superman 2025, and this is my spoiler review. So watch out for any spoilers. I'll try not to spoil it too much. One or two might slip through, but I'll try and warn you if one's coming. Okay, my initial thoughts on the film is I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was gonna. It's probably the most fun Superman film since the old original, the very first Superman, which I found fun. Part 3 was obviously supposed to be fun with Richard Pryor and there's Quest for Peace, but they were so bad you couldn't enjoy them. Then of course you had Superman Returns, which tried to recapture the original spirit and failed because Brandon Routh, even though he looks like Christopher Reeve, you can't recreate that. And they learned from that. Then they went with Henry Cavill for Man of Steel, and I enjoyed Man of Steel, but I didn't find it fun. I found at some parts it was a little bit of a chore, and you was waiting for the sentimental moments to get over with, and you're waiting for action. Then of course it went very heavy with the action, and it didn't feel as light-hearted as, again, the original. What James Gunn's tried to do here is recapture what was so fondly remembered of the original film, and he kind of succeeds. It is, as I said, it's definitely the most fun Superman film since the original one. I enjoyed the introduction of Krypto. I also like the fact that the film starts off running. It's not an origin story. He understands that everyone knows about Superman's origin. Krypton is destroyed, and in a last-ditch effort, his parents send him to Earth. Now, what I like about this film, spoiler alert, is it's suggested that his parents wanted Superman to rule over Earth, and he's grown up over the past 30 odd years thinking that the message they sent to him was that he was going to protect Earth. So this is obviously something new. I had never heard of this before in any Superman lore, and I really like this angle. Furthermore, I liked the fact that Lex Luthor, for in my opinion, the first time ever, has been accurately portrayed on the big screen. Now, that's no disregard, no slight to the previous efforts. I think Gene Hackman and Kevin Spacey are two of the greatest American actors ever. I'm a huge fan of both of them. But their interpretations of Lex Luthor, in my eyes, was always, that's not Lex Luthor. That's just a bumbling criminal with a cunning plan. Whereas Nicholas Hoult, Lex Luthor in this, is much more how I always envisioned him. A strong, powerful man who isn't intimidated by Superman. I'd never liked the fact that he was always cowering and hiding in the shadows when Superman turned up. Where in this, he's happy to go toe to toe, stand in front of him, because he's so confident that he is right, that he knows Superman's every move. And it really shows off his intelligence more so than any previous ones. The other ones, he might have some sort of plan, some sort of idea, but going back to say one of the older Supermans, when Superman tricks Lex Luthor to get Zod to let him go into the chamber and regain his powers. This Lex Luthor, I couldn't imagine falling for that.
Try to get them all into this molecule chamber. It takes away their powers, see? And turns them into ordinary human beings. Now, if you could...
Don't go in there, General. It's a trap.
Luthor, you poisonous snake!
That's a molecule chamber. It makes people like you into people like me.
Superman has to work hard to beat Lex, and this is how it's always been in the comics. This is why Lex Luthor is his arch enemy, because he's a man. Yeah, of course, Superman could kill him, but he wouldn't, because that is not his MO. He doesn't kill people. He saves people. And they've really doubled down on the saving part of it. Obviously, one of the complaints about Man of Steel in particular was the collateral damage. When Superman and Zod are fighting in the city and people were saying, obviously, thousands of people must have been killed. Superman's supposed to be protecting people at all costs. And it's further explored in Batman v Superman. But I feel as if they've gone too far the other way a bit with this one. I like the idea that he's trying to protect people. We see little elements of this in the trailer of him protecting a young girl and a few other people, like holding a building. But this goes a little bit too far. Little things like him saving squirrels and while people are trying to fight. I understand the sentiment of it. Or when a building is blown out, he asks, "Is everyone okay?" I mean, I understand James Gunn's definitely trying to show everyone, look, this is the Superman you used to know and love. He's the one who puts people first. But realistically, if he turns around and someone says, no, he's really badly damaged, you better get him to a hospital, would Superman stop fighting that fire-breathing beast to take this man to the hospital? No, I think realistically, he should have continued fighting and then, to his best to try and keep it away from people. Maybe have a comment and say, we've got to keep this fight away from the people, or we've got to get the people out of here first. But the small details of him flying down, as I said, the squirrel bit in particular was just a note too far. I do really like David Corenswet, though. It's always a gamble. You never know what kind of Superman you're going to get, because, as I've mentioned before, what I like about this, whenever they recast Superman, is it's a unknown entity. In fact, the only time I can think of that they ever cast someone who was a known entity was Tim Burton's failed rendition of Superman, where he got Nicolas Cage. Part of me still wishes that film had gone made, just out of morbid curiosity, just to see what would have happened. But this David Corenswet, he's a very humorous actor. I think he's very sweet. I like the idea they touched upon that people can't tell that he's Superman when he wears these glasses. These glasses sort of warp people's perception of him. It's interesting. I'll give him that. But even when he was Clark Kent, he does look different enough to Superman that I can sort of believe it. Again, I don't. He's not a patch on Christopher Reeve. I don't think we'll ever find someone who has the heart of Christopher Reeve. And not just him as a character as Superman, but Christopher Reeve in real life is well known as being someone who has a huge heart and cares a lot about other people, and you can't help but that bleed through in his portrayal of Superman. David Corenswet was a very sweet Clark Kent and Superman. but it leans a little bit too much towards the humour for us to get the kind of heart that we did with the original two Superman films. Saying that, I think my initial reaction, bearing in mind I've only just seen the film, after Superman 1 and 2, this is my new favourite Superman, I think. And I'm sure there's going to be swathes of people saying that's not Superman. He wouldn't do this, and he's too weak and too vulnerable. But I think that's what makes him more appealing. I've always been a huge fan of comic books anyway, and I often lent more towards Marvel because they always showed more vulnerable characters anyway. Spider-Man was always vulnerable. Hulk's vulnerable. You know, he's uncontrollable. He can't. He's Wolverine's vulnerable. All of them are vulnerable. They all have their weaknesses. Superman was always one that I found it hard to get on board with because he was too untouchable. You know, even in the old films, which I think are still the best ones, some of the things he does, like turning back time, spinning around, you think, well, you're now opening a new Pandora's box here, because you think, well, why don't he do that every time? Why doesn't he just keep turning back time? Or why does he only chuck a cellophane S over someone once in the history of the films? What I like, what James Gunn has done, he's deliberately made him more vulnerable, not just physically, but also emotionally. You see moments in this where he gets visibly upset from finding out that his parents' message to him was only half a message. He gets upset, physically upset, when he feels that Lex Luthor has possibly harmed Crypto. So he's, again, this is a scene which has been shown online where he bursts into the office, and I really liked this scene because it showed Superman's vulnerability. He's genuinely angry because he's concerned for the whereabouts of his dog. I say his dog. And I really liked Lex Luthor's reaction to it, because had it been Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor, Kevin Spacey's Lex Luthor, or Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor, the moment Superman burst into that room, they would have cowered and hid under the desk. But Nicholas Hoult's Lex Luthor holds his ground, which is, again, going back to why I really liked his portrayal of Lex Luthor in this, is how he should act.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be...
Lex, I tried to stop him.
It's fine, Heather. Superman, we finally meet. Would you like a coffee?
Where's the dog?
Dog?
The dog, Luthor! You took the dog!
That's right, you get all of this.
Where's the dog?
I have no clue what you're talking about.
He's just a dog.
I don't know what dog you're talking about. Ugly dog in a cave?
What did you say?
I do feel I was a bit apprehensive going in because I knew there was a lot of characters. I knew from the trailer there was going to be a lot of characters in it. I did like the additional characters, particularly Green Lantern and Mr. Terrific. I felt they were both humorous and important to the story in equal amounts. I'd say Green Lantern's more on the humorous side and Mr. Terrific more important to the story. I also like the fact that it deliberately does not try to retread old grounds, which I feel other Superman sequels have always tried to do. They've stepped too close to the Superman stories of before. They've tried to recreate them. They give us an origin. They give us Lex Luthor's dastardly plan, usually about land ownership or something like that. And it just feels as if it's retreading the original. What you can say about this, it definitely isn't retreading the original. It tries to do something different with Superman, which I, for one, enjoyed. I guess regarding the Superman comics, as I said, I'm not the biggest fan of Superman necessarily as a character, but there's no denying he's one of the three biggest superhero characters of all time. You got him, Batman, and Spider-Man. Whatever order you put them in, if there's ever a Mount Rushmore of superheroes, them three are guaranteed on there, and I can never take that away from him. I've always felt he was slightly overpowered, but again, I like what James Gunn's done with him, made him a bit more vulnerable. Maybe you could have done with maybe one or two less characters. The Daily Planet characters, I know they're important to some people, like fans of the comics. Do you think we've got to have every single one of these characters show up? I'd rather they streamlined it. You could have had Lois and Jimmy Olsen as the only two named employees, and it wouldn't take away from the film. If anything, it would, I think, add to the film. Because when I see these other characters, I think, okay, well, I've got to learn their name. Are they going to be important later on? How important will they be? And maybe James Gunn's playing the long game. He wants to bring these characters into the foreground in later films. But I feel that's a bit short-sighted. I think you could have streamed off some of them. I felt that the Justice team, or whatever they called themselves, it was good not to have too many of them. To stick to 3. Hawk Girl felt a little underused, but at the same time, if she got more to do, then it would have taken away from the rest of the film. I felt James Gunn's balanced it very well. So Lois Lane played by Rachel Brosnahan, and I felt that their chemistry was okay. I think there's a lot of room for development there. It's no way as good as the chemistry of the original Clark and Lois, but it doesn't mean it can't grow with time. I think give them a bit of space. They're good individually, and I like some of the moments between them, like in particular with her interviewing him and how he's getting they have a bit of a lover's tiff. She's keeping him at a distance, but it almost seems like a paint by the numbers. This is what couples are like. I didn't feel as if it was quite hitting all the marks yet, but that doesn't mean it won't be, because they both came across to me as excellent actors, and I feel as if they nailed the parts, or at least their interpretations of them. Again, David Corenswet, I felt he done a good job and he was easy to watch. I liked that it wasn't all about sex appeal, which I felt with Henry Cavill, they really lent on the fact of his attractiveness. We must have a scene of him topless in every like portrayal of any time that he played Superman. We have to sort of something for the female gaze. Whereas with David Corenswet, I don't think he was topless at all in this film. Not that that's important, but it was more about his sentimental attractiveness, him doing the right thing, him being a little sweet country boy, you know. And there's a nice little line I liked in it when they're talking about punk rock music and how Lois Lane was into punk, and he's saying, "Oh yeah, I was into punk," and he starts giving some mainstream bands, and she says, "That's not punk," and he's saying, "Well, they're very popular," and then he says about how being nice to people, maybe that's the real punk rock. And it got me thinking. I think the amount of cynical people you meet nowadays, and there's so many people who would go into, say, comment sections, probably not in this video. I don't think I've got enough people watching this video to comment. But if you go on almost any TikTok video, you've got a high and mighty comment section, people going, "Oh, well, you know, what do you know about it? You're talking crap." And anyone who does come across this who's a Superman fan will probably tell me how I'm talking crap. But it's just my opinion and I don't care. But we are in a world where there's very cynical people who thrive off of putting other people down because it gives them this self-deluded belief that it makes them more intelligent. Almost like how Lex Luthor is in this. But what I like about Superman, particularly in this film, is he doesn't worry so much about that. But he also shows his vulnerability. I like the little lines about him. He's acting as if he doesn't care about social media, but at the same time, he obviously does. Because he says, it's a few, I'm not going to say too much of it because I would encourage people to go watch it. As I said, I personally, I enjoyed it. I didn't find myself fidgeting in the seat. There's one or two scenes where you might feel, okay, well, is this going somewhere? But there's nothing that bad. Nothing drags particularly bad, like how you would say find scenes in Superman Returns or Man of Steel. Both of them films are guilty of having scenes which are just almost feel like filler. This, I wouldn't say there's any part of this that feels like filler. And also with the ending. Now, superhero films often have multiple endings, multiple villains that they have to go overcome. And I thought this was going to fall into that trap. Now, there's some more spoilers. When Superman, you find out who this Ultraman, who's the only person who can beat Superman, apparently, through Lex Luthor's instruction, is a clone of Superman, which made me think straight away, okay, is that Bizarro? He's supposed to be sort of almost brain dead, a bit stupid. When Superman finally overcomes him, then Lex Luthor sends in his troops, this army of like flying soldiers, and I thought, okay, well, unfortunately, we're going to have another 10-minute battle, but thankfully it wasn't. Superman made short work of them, and how he should have, really. I know there are going to be loads of people criticising about how weak physically Superman is in this film. I would say, just off the top of my head, yeah, he's probably the weakest physically interpretation of Superman we've had so far. But I don't think that makes him a weak character. As I said, I think taken from Marvel's lead, I think if anything that makes him more relatable and stronger morally. I hope that when the inevitable sequel comes along, they don't just try to retread what he does here. I know many people are fans of the Guardians sequels, for example. However, me personally, I really enjoyed the first Guardians of the Galaxy. 2 and 3, I wasn't that bothered about. I just felt as if he was James Gunn was trying to recreate the magic that he managed to do with the first one. I hope that this film is well received because I don't want them to keep wiping the slate clean and starting again. Yes, I was a fan of Henry Cavill. I liked him, and in a way, I felt it was a shame that he didn't get more time or better scripts. But I can understand why James Gunn has completely started anew, because it's his new vision where he is being given the reins for the DC universe, much in the way that Kevin Feige was, for example. And I hope he's true to his word that he's not going to start rushing projects. I feel that has been Marvel's downfall of late, is you're getting films that nobody asked for and they're trying their best with them, but sometimes they're just sort of going through the motions and trying to recapture what was so good about previous Marvel films. Which again, if people look through rose-tinted glasses, if you look at some of the older Marvel films, they weren't that great either. You know, springs to mind For the Dark World, for example, wasn't particularly great. The first Incredible Hulk, or the Edward Norton Incredible Hulk, was okay, passable. I watched it a number of times only because I'm a huge Incredible Hulk fan. But there are many missteps in the Marvel universe, but they kept tracking until they got it really good with films like Winter Soldier and Infinity War and Endgame. Hopefully DC can recreate that, but taking slow steps. I do feel this is a good start, and I hope I'm not alone in this. I'll find out in the next couple of days. As I said, I've deliberately avoided other people's reviews because I want to be honest with my own. And that is my review of Superman 2025. I do kind of feel it would have been good to have a different title. It doesn't particularly matter that much, but one thing I liked about one of the things I liked about Man of Steel was the title. It sounds silly, but it's a small thing. I like when people deliberately differentiate themselves from previous iterations. And for me, the best Superman still remains the original Christopher Reeve one. So it'd been nice if maybe they could have found a slight variation of the word of the title, but hey ho, it's a small criticism and otherwise an enjoyable film. As I'm recording this on the 11th of July, the film's only come out today. At the moment, I've just checked IMDb, there's no ratings to go by. On Rotten Tomatoes at the moment, Superman is currently holding a fresh rating of 82% by the critics and 95% by the audience, which is excellent. But I do understand this often happens, especially with IPs which are so popular, that the diehard fans will go there on the day and even ones who haven't seen it will vote it up, especially when they see it's competing against rival studios such as Marvel. I don't I don't personally fall into this category. I like to be unbiased and decide. However, I did notice, which is a rarity for the times that I go to films, that people actually were applauding when the film finished. Now, again, bear in mind, I was probably watching it with some hardcore Superman fans who were just probably happy that they saw a film which they could watch and not think, oh, it's a bit heavy, it's a bit deep, which it doesn't need to be, because at the end of the day, it is a superhero film. It's a comic book film. It should be something you can enjoy with a family, and I think this is exactly what that is. The budget for this film is 225 million. As of yet, again, it's only just been released. It's made 22.5 million. So 10% of its budget back already. I don't doubt that this will be quite successful, and I think it will definitely make its money back and probably be one of the most profitable films of the year. That's my hot take. Take it to the bank. In the next episode, I shall be reviewing Sorcerer by William Friedkin from 1977. A seldom seen or spoke about film, which I discovered only recently and thought was pretty good. I'll tell you more about it in the next episode. But thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Adios.
My favorite part was when Superman flew all the Jews out of Egypt.